Al-Ghazali was one of the greatest Islamic philosophers and theologians of the medieval period, whose thoughts have influenced generations across the world, and his reflections on wealth and morality reveal a profound understanding of human nature and society. Al-Ghazali was born in Tus in 1058 during a time of political upheaval and intellectual ferment in Persia, and from an early age he was recognized for his extraordinary intellect and relentless curiosity. His journey was one of seeking truth and reconciling the human soul with divine, which led him to explore jurisprudence, philosophy, theology, and mysticism, and throughout his life he witnessed the dangers of pursuing material wealth at the expense of spiritual and moral development, and he argued that money is not merely a tool for personal comfort, but a reflection of inner ethical values, and the pursuit of wealth without moral guidance can corrode the soul and undermine social cohesion. Al-Ghazali emphasized that earning and using money should never be divorced from justice, honesty, and generosity, and he critiqued those who accumulate riches through exploitation, deception, or excessive greed, because in his view wealth is a trust from God to be used responsibly for the benefit of society, and he illustrated this through practical examples from his time, noting merchant, scholars, and rulers who fell into ruin because their love for money eclipsed their commitment to ethical principles, and he contrasted them with those who balanced worldly success with spiritual mindfulness, demonstrating that wealth can serve as a means of cultivating virtue when guided by moral awareness, and Al-Ghazali extended this principle to everyday transactions, arguing that even small acts of fairness, honesty, and charity in trade and business have the power to transform individual character and society at large, and he was particularly concerned with the moral education of youth, urging parents, teachers, and leaders to instill values that prioritize honesty, integrity, and compassion over mere accumulation of riches, and he warned that societies that glorify wealth without ethics inevitably experience social decay, corruption, and injustice, and this perspective resonates profoundly in the context of modern life in the United States, where economic success is often equated with personal achievement and where the temptations of consumerism, materialism, and competitive individualism can overshadow the cultivation of moral virtues. Al-Ghazali would likely advise contemporary individuals to examine their relationship with money, reflect on the broader impact of their financial choices, and recognize that ethical financial behavior contributes to personal fulfillment, social harmony, and collective well-being, and he would highlight the importance of philanthropy, responsible investment, and mindful consumption as ways to harmonize economic activity with ethical principles, and he would draw attention to the dangers of unchecked desire for material gain, noting that even in affluent societies, excessive focus on wealth can lead to anxiety, social isolation, moral compromise, and spiritual emptiness. And in practical terms, he would encourage people to earn honestly, to spend wisely, to support those in need, and to cultivate generosity and gratitude as central components of a meaningful life. And in this sense, Al-Ghazali's teachings are not only a historical reflection, but a timeless guide urging humanity to recognize that money is not an end in itself, but a reflection of our inner values and a tool that can either corrupt or elevate the human spirit, and by integrating ethical awareness into financial decisions, individuals can transform economic activity into a form of moral practice that benefits both themselves and the wider community, and his writings illustrate that morality and economics are deeply intertwined, and that the true measure of wealth is not the abundance of possessions, but the ethical quality of the life one leads, the integrity of one's dealings, and the positive impact one has on society. And in our contemporary context, these lessons are urgent and relevant for policymakers, business leaders, educators, and everyday citizens, and Al-Ghazali's philosophy challenges the notion that material success alone constitutes achievement, urging instead a holistic approach that blends economic prosperity with moral responsibility, and he consistently reminds us that money, when pursued without wisdom, can enslave the mind and corrupt the heart, but when guided by ethical insight, it can become a powerful instrument for justice, compassion, and human flourishing. And from the perspective of someone navigating the complexities of the 21st century financial systems, the global economy, and the pervasive culture of consumerism, Al-Ghazali's insistence on moral accountability provides a framework for evaluating not only personal choices but also societal structures, encouraging regulation, transparency, equitable distribution, and conscious stewardship of resources. And he would advocate for a society where profit does not overshadow principle, where wealth is a means to serve humanity, and where economic interactions reinforce rather than erode ethical norms. And in this way, the connection between money and morality as articulated by Al-Ghazali, transcends time and geography, providing a lens through which to assess contemporary challenges ranging from corporate malfeasance and economic inequality to environmental sustainability and social justice, and he would likely argue that fostering moral sensibility in relation to money begins with cultivating self-awareness, mindfulness, and ethical reflection, encouraging individuals to pause and consider the consequences of their financial decisions on themselves, others, and the environment, and he would underscore the role of education in instilling these values, teaching children and adults alike to value honesty, integrity, generosity, and responsibility above mere accumulation of wealth. And in practical terms, he might suggest actions such as fair pricing, ethical investment, charitable giving, responsible consumption, and support for social initiatives as ways to operationalize moral principles in economic life. And by doing so, Al-Ghazali's insights remind us that the pursuit of money cannot be separated from the cultivation of virtue, and that true prosperity encompasses not only material comfort, but also ethical integrity, spiritual depth, and societal harmony. And his work therefore serves as a guide to navigate the tension between worldly desire and moral duty, suggesting that the measure of a person's success lies not solely in their financial achievements, but in the character they exhibit, the justice they practice, and the generosity they extend to others. Al-Ghazali's reflections on the ethical dimension of wealth were rooted in his deep understanding of human psychology and society, and he observed that unchecked desire for material accumulation often leads to moral compromise, social tension, and spiritual disquiet, and he stressed that the pursuit of money should be guided by wisdom, self-restraint, and a consciousness of divine accountability. And in his time he witnessed merchants and rulers whose obsession with profit blinded them to fairness, compassion, and justice, and he noted that their downfall was not merely financial but moral and social, for when money dominates the heart, it corrupts intentions, undermines relationships, and erodes trust. And he contrasted this with examples of individuals who approached wealth as a means to serve their communities, support the needy, and cultivate virtue, demonstrating that economic activity can be an instrument of moral development and social cohesion. And in practical terms, he encouraged honest trade, transparency in dealings, moderation in consumption, and generosity toward those less fortunate as ways to align financial activity with ethical principles. And these lessons are strikingly relevant to contemporary society, where economic pressures, consumer culture, and competitive individualism often tempt people to prioritize profit over principle, and Al-Ghazali's guidance invites reflection on how modern individuals can navigate the complexities of financial life with integrity and mindfulness. And he would likely advise that the measure of true success lies not in the size of one's bank account, but in the quality of one's character, the fairness of one's interactions, and the positive impact one has on others. And he would extend this concern to social structures, emphasizing that societies that valorize wealth without ethics risk fostering corruption, exploitation, and inequity. And he would advocate for systems of accountability, transparency, regulation, and ethical oversight that ensure economic prosperity does not come at the expense of justice. And he would also highlight the role of personal responsibility, arguing that even within imperfect systems, individuals have the power to exercise moral discernment in their financial decisions, and to use their resources to promote welfare, alleviate suffering, and contribute to collective well-being. And Al-Ghazali's teachings also underscore the spiritual dimension of money, reminding that material wealth is a test and a trust that can either nurture or hinder the soul, and he encouraged reflection, contemplation, and self-discipline as tools to prevent the heart from being enslaved by desire, and to transform wealth into a vehicle for ethical practice and social benefit. And he offered practical guidance for daily life, urging people to earn honestly, avoid exploitation, practice moderation in spending, and dedicate part of their resources to charitable causes, thus integrating morality into every aspect of economic engagement. And in modern terms, this translates into actions such as ethical business practices, responsible investment, philanthropy, mindful consumption, and active participation in community development. And through these means, individuals embody the principles of justice, honesty, generosity, and compassion that Al-Ghazali identified as essential to a moral relationship with money. And he repeatedly emphasized that wealth should never become an end in itself, but should serve higher purposes, fostering virtue, supporting society, and enhancing human dignity. And he observed that when people approach money with ethical awareness, they experience not only social respect and trust, but also inner satisfaction and peace, because their actions align with principles that transcend mere material gain. And he warned that the pursuit of wealth without moral anchoring leads to anxiety, greed, envy, and social discord, highlighting that prosperity, divorced from ethics, is hollow and unsustainable. And in this light, Al-Ghazali's philosophy offers a timeless framework for evaluating financial decisions, encouraging individuals to consider the broader implications of their economic behavior on family, community, society, and the environment. And he stressed that moral reflection should accompany all forms of economic activity, from trade and business to investment and charitable giving. And he urged educators, parents, and leaders to instill these values early to create a culture where ethical responsibility guides economic interaction. And in applying these teachings to the United States and other modern societies, one sees the importance of integrating morality into capitalism, corporate governance, personal finance, and social policy, for without conscious attention to ethics, wealth can easily become a source of division, exploitation, and spiritual emptiness, while when aligned with virtue it can promote justice, compassion, and collective flourishing. And Al-Ghazali also explored the role of intention in financial matters, emphasizing that the morality of wealth is determined not only by its acquisition and use, but by the motives behind it. And he argued that earning money with the intention to serve God, to benefit society, and to fulfill moral obligations transforms ordinary economic activity into an act of spiritual significance. And he highlighted that even small choices in daily financial life, from fair pricing to charitable donations, reflect and shape the moral character of the individual and the health of society. And he warned against allowing ambition, greed, or social pressure to dictate financial behavior, noting that succumbing to these forces erodes character and undermines trust and social cohesion. And his philosophy teaches that the ethical management of money requires continuous self-awareness, discipline, reflection, and a commitment to justice and generosity. And in a practical modern context, this translates into being mindful of spending habits, ensuring that income is earned through ethical means, engaging in philanthropy, supporting community initiatives, and cultivating financial literacy to make informed ethical decisions. And Al-Ghazali's insight reveals that money is a tool that amplifies character and intention, and that moral vigilance in financial life is essential for personal fulfillment, social harmony, and spiritual development. And he repeatedly asserts that wealth pursued in accordance with moral and spiritual principles can transform society, elevate human relationships, and deepen the sense of purpose. And he encourages readers to see financial activity not as a purely secular endeavor, but as an opportunity to practice virtue, to nurture compassion, and to contribute meaningfully to the welfare of others. And his guidance bridges the practical and the spiritual, the personal and the social, showing that economics and morality are inseparable, and that the way individuals handle money reflects their inner ethical and spiritual state. And in reflecting on these teachings, contemporary individuals are challenged to integrate ethical awareness into their financial choices, to prioritize fairness, justice, and generosity over self-interest, and to recognize that the accumulation of wealth is valuable only insofar as it serves higher moral purposes and contributes positively to society. And Al-Ghazali's philosophy therefore provides a timeless and universal framework for understanding money, not merely as a means to material ends, but as a reflection of character, a vehicle for virtue, and a medium through which human beings can align worldly activity with ethical and spiritual ideals. Al-Ghazali also devoted significant attention to the societal implications of wealth and the moral responsibilities that accompany financial resources. He observed that when individuals pursue money without ethical consideration, it not only corrupts their character, but also erodes social cohesion and undermines trust within communities. And he warned that greed and selfishness often lead to exploitation, injustice, and widespread suffering. And in contrast, he celebrated examples of people who utilized their wealth to support education, healthcare, infrastructure, and the vulnerable, demonstrating that money can be a powerful instrument for social transformation when guided by moral principles. And he insisted that moral accountability in financial affairs extends beyond individual conduct to include the structures and institutions that govern economic life. And he argued that justice, fairness, and ethical oversight must permeate all levels of society, from local commerce to national governance and international trade. And in contemporary society, these lessons resonate in the context of corporate responsibility, ethical investing, economic inequality, and philanthropic engagement, because the ethical use of wealth has the power to foster social stability, reduce suffering, and promote equitable opportunity. And Al-Ghazali emphasized that cultivating virtue in financial matters begins with the individual, urging reflection on personal motives, intentions, and actions in earning spending and giving. He advocated for conscious awareness of how financial behavior affects others, and for the integration of principles such as honesty, transparency, generosity, and compassion into daily economic decisions, and he cautioned that the pursuit of wealth purely for self-indulgence or status leads to moral decay, anxiety, and spiritual emptiness, and he underscored that even modest financial decisions carry ethical weight and can either reinforce vice or cultivate virtue, and in modern terms this principle applies to choices ranging from personal spending habits to corporate strategies, investment priorities, and public policy development, and he argued that education and moral cultivation are central to fostering a culture in which economic activity aligns with ethical standards, and he emphasized that teaching the young about responsible money management, fairness in trade, and the importance of charitable giving strengthens society and prepares future generations to handle wealth with integrity and wisdom. And Al-Ghazali's reflections also touch upon the spiritual dimension of wealth, highlighting that material resources are a test and a trust, and that ethical reflection and self-discipline are essential to prevent greed from enslaving the heart and corrupting the soul, and he encouraged contemplation, mindfulness, and restraint as tools to transform financial activity into a moral practice that nurtures character and benefits society, and he repeatedly illustrates that wealth is not inherently corrupting or virtuous, rather it is the intentions, the use, and the moral awareness of the individual that determine its ethical value, and he provided practical guidance urging people to earn honestly, to avoid exploitation, to practice moderation, to give generously, and to engage in acts of charity and social support, thereby aligning financial conduct with moral and spiritual principles. And, in applying these lessons to contemporary life, one sees the relevance to personal finance, budgeting, charitable donations, ethical business practices, corporate social responsibility, and sustainable consumption, and he emphasized that money has the potential to either enslave the soul or elevate it to higher levels of ethical awareness and spiritual fulfillment, and Al-Ghazali stressed that an integrated approach to economics and morality promotes justice, social harmony, personal contentment, and communal well-being, and he recognized that wealth can magnify human tendencies, both positive and negative, and therefore moral vigilance, reflection, and education are essential to ensure that economic activity contributes to virtue rather than vice, and in modern contexts this can be operationalized through transparency, accountability, equitable opportunity, ethical investing, philanthropy, responsible consumption, and fostering financial literacy, so that individuals and institutions make decisions that benefit themselves, society, and the environment. And he would likely argue that financial systems and policies should encourage fairness, reduce exploitation, and support the ethical use of resources to serve the common good, and he further highlighted the transformative potential of money, when guided by moral principles, suggesting that it can strengthen family life, support education, alleviate poverty, and enable communities to flourish, and he consistently reminds us that prosperity and material comfort are meaningless if divorced from ethical integrity, moral responsibility, and social consciousness. And in this sense, Al-Ghazali's philosophy transcends historical and geographical boundaries, providing timeless guidance for evaluating wealth, its acquisition, and its use, and he would urge modern individuals to reflect upon the motivations behind their financial decisions, to assess their impact on others, and to ensure that every monetary transaction is aligned with values of justice, honesty, generosity, and compassion, and he observed that the ethical management of money requires continuous attention, self-discipline, reflection, and a commitment to the welfare of others, and he maintained that when people integrate moral awareness into financial life, they experience not only social respect and trust, but also inner satisfaction and spiritual peace, because their actions reflect alignment with higher ethical principles, and he highlighted that the pursuit of money should never overshadow the cultivation of character, the practice of virtue, or the fulfillment of moral obligations to family, community, and society, and he urged that wealth should be used consciously to support those in need, fund social initiatives, enhance human welfare, and cultivate personal and collective virtue, and Al-Ghazali's teachings therefore link money and morality, inextricably, showing that financial activity is not merely a secular or practical concern, but also a profound moral and spiritual endeavor that reflects the integrity, character, and ethical responsibility of the individual and the health, justice, and cohesion of society. And in a contemporary context, these insights challenge individuals, policymakers, business leaders, and educators to integrate moral reflection into financial practices, prioritize fairness and compassion over mere profit, and to recognize that the true measure of wealth lies not in accumulation, but in the ethical impact one has on the world. Al-Ghazali's philosophy further delves into the psychological and spiritual dimensions of wealth, highlighting that money has the capacity to either dominate the heart or serve as a tool for cultivating virtue, and he observed that attachment to material possessions can lead to anxiety, greed, envy, and moral compromise, whereas approaching wealth with reflection, moderation, and ethical intention nurtures self-discipline, compassion, generosity, and spiritual awareness, and he emphasized that the morality of financial conduct is inseparable from the intentions behind earning, spending, and giving, and he argued that every financial decision carries ethical weight, from business transactions to personal expenditures to charitable contributions, and therefore cultivating moral awareness in relation to money is essential for personal fulfillment, social harmony, and spiritual development. And Al-Ghazali also examined the societal consequences of wealth distribution and economic behavior, observing that inequity, corruption, and exploitation arise when financial systems and individual practices are divorced from moral responsibility, and he highlighted the importance of justice, fairness, transparency, and accountability, both at the level of individual behavior and institutional structures, and he suggested that societies that integrate moral principles into economic activity foster trust, social cohesion, and collective flourishing, whereas those that prioritize profit above ethics experience conflict, social tension, and systemic injustice. And in practical terms, he urged individuals to earn honestly, to avoid exploitation and dishonesty, to practice moderation in consumption, to give generously, and to engage in charitable acts supporting the welfare of others. And he emphasized that these behaviors strengthen character, nurture virtue, and contribute to a morally healthy society. And he repeatedly noted that money itself is neither inherently good nor evil, but functions as an amplifier of human intention and character, and therefore ethical reflection, self-discipline, and conscious engagement are essential to ensure that financial activity serves the higher purpose of moral and spiritual development. And in a contemporary context, this guidance applies directly to personal finance, corporate practice, government policy, and social responsibility, and he would likely advocate for practices such as ethical investment, responsible spending, corporate social responsibility, equitable taxation, and philanthropy as mechanisms to align economic activity with moral values. And he stressed that education plays a central role in cultivating awareness of the ethical dimensions of wealth, and in fostering habits that integrate morality into financial life. And he argued that teaching children and adults to value honesty, integrity, generosity, and fairness above mere accumulation of wealth creates a culture in which financial activity is harmonized with virtue and social responsibility. And Al-Ghazali also explored the connection between money and spiritual fulfillment, emphasizing that wealth pursued without ethical guidance can enslave the heart and disrupt inner peace, whereas wealth used with reflection, intention, and generosity can support spiritual growth, moral character, and the well-being of society. And he encouraged mindfulness, contemplation, and self-restraint as tools to prevent greed from dominating the heart and to transform financial decisions into acts of moral practice. And he provided numerous practical guidelines urging individuals to earn honestly, avoid exploitation, engage in fair trade, practice moderation in consumption, give generously, and support social and charitable initiatives, thereby linking financial life with ethical and spiritual principles. And he repeatedly stressed that the measure of true wealth is not material abundance, but the moral and ethical quality of the individual and the positive impact one has on others. And he highlighted that prosperity is only meaningful when accompanied by justice, honesty, compassion, and social consciousness. And he observed that financial success without moral accountability fosters anxiety, stress, conflict, and spiritual emptiness, whereas wealth managed with virtue nurtures inner peace, trust, social cohesion, and collective welfare. And he urged individuals to approach money as a tool that can either corrupt or elevate the human spirit depending on how it is acquired, used, and reflected upon. And he emphasized that ethical reflection and moral education are essential for preventing greed, exploitation, and social harm, and for transforming wealth into a vehicle for social good, personal development, and spiritual growth. And he consistently highlighted the importance of intention in financial activity, noting that earning with the purpose of serving God, benefiting society, and supporting those in need elevates ordinary economic transactions into acts of moral and spiritual significance. And he argued that even small choices in daily financial life reflect character and shape social outcomes, and therefore cultivating a morally conscious approach to money is not optional, but necessary for personal fulfillment, social harmony, and ethical integrity. and in modern societies, Al-Ghazali's insights provide guidance for navigating the complexities of consumerism, corporate practice, financial planning, and public policy, encouraging individuals to integrate moral reflection into financial decisions to prioritize fairness, justice, generosity, and compassion, and to recognize that the ethical management of wealth contributes to the common good, strengthens relationships, and fosters spiritual and personal growth. And he would likely argue that governments, corporations, and individuals share responsibility in ensuring that economic systems and behaviors are aligned with moral principles promoting transparency, accountability, equitable opportunity, and conscious stewardship of resources. And he emphasized that when people cultivate virtue in relation to money, they experience not only social respect, trust, and cooperation, but also a profound sense of satisfaction and inner peace, because their actions reflect alignment with higher ethical and spiritual values. And Al-Ghazali's philosophy thus presents a comprehensive framework for understanding money as a reflection of character, a test of moral integrity, and a potential vehicle for the betterment of society. And he repeatedly underscores that wealth should never be an end in itself, but a means to cultivate virtue, serve others, and foster justice, and that ethical awareness in financial matters is inseparable from personal growth, spiritual development, and social well-being. And in reflecting upon these teachings, contemporary individuals are challenged to integrate morality into every aspect of economic activity, to make financial decisions that prioritize fairness, generosity, compassion, and justice, and to recognize that true prosperity encompasses not only material success, but also ethical integrity, moral responsibility, and positive social impact. And Al-Ghazali's insights remain a timeless and universal guide, demonstrating that the link between money and morality is not merely theoretical, but profoundly practical, relevant, and necessary for both individual fulfillment and societal flourishing. Building upon his reflections, Al-Ghazali also explored the broader ethical landscape of economic life, emphasizing that the relationship between money and morality extends far beyond individual behavior to encompass family structures, communities, governance, and global interactions. And he observed that the pursuit of wealth without ethical guidance not only corrupts character, but can destabilize societies, foster exploitation, increase inequality, and weaken social trust. And he argued that moral reflection and conscious decision-making in financial matters are therefore critical for the health and harmony of both individuals and communities. And he provided numerous examples of how ethical behavior in earning, spending, and giving cultivates trust, strengthens relationships, and reinforces social cohesion. And he consistently highlighted that financial decisions are never neutral, and that even seemingly minor choices in trade, investment, consumption, or philanthropy carry moral weight, shaping character, influencing others, and contributing to the moral fabric of society. And he stressed that cultivating virtue in relation to money requires continuous reflection, self-discipline, education, and awareness, and that developing habits of honesty, transparency, fairness, moderation, generosity, and compassion transforms not only personal life, but also social and communal environments. And Al-Ghazali also emphasized that wealth should be approached as a means rather than an end, as a tool to serve higher moral and spiritual purposes rather than a source of obsession or pride. And he repeatedly observed that money amplifies human tendencies, both positive and negative, and therefore ethical vigilance and intentionality are essential to ensure that economic activity nurtures virtue rather than vice. And he highlighted the importance of intention in financial behavior, noting that earning with the purpose of serving God, benefiting others, supporting those in need, and contributing to justice elevates ordinary financial transactions into acts of moral and spiritual significance. And he urged individuals to engage in fair trade, to avoid exploitation, to practice moderation in consumption, to dedicate resources to charitable initiatives, and to cultivate generosity and social responsibility as integral components of economic life. And in contemporary society, these lessons are profoundly relevant for personal finance, corporate governance, investment strategies, public policy, and social engagement, because they provide a framework for integrating ethical awareness into every financial decision, fostering fairness, accountability, and positive social impact. And he argued that education plays a pivotal role in instilling these values, teaching children and adults to recognize the moral dimensions of wealth, to value honesty, integrity, fairness, and compassion over mere accumulation of material resources, and to develop habits that align financial behavior with ethical principles. And he emphasized that when individuals integrate morality into their financial life, they not only enhance their personal fulfillment and spiritual well-being, but also contribute to the stability, justice, and prosperity of society as a whole, and he consistently highlighted that material wealth pursued without ethical reflection fosters greed, anxiety, exploitation, social discord, and spiritual emptiness, whereas wealth managed with virtue cultivates self-discipline, inner peace, trust, social cohesion, and collective welfare, and he repeatedly underscored that the measure of true wealth lies not in possessions, but in character, ethical integrity, and the positive impact one has on others, and he urged contemporary readers to consider the broader consequences of their financial actions on family, community, society, and the environment, and to use wealth consciously as a means to serve others, support social initiatives, foster education, alleviate poverty, and promote justice, and he warned that failing to integrate moral awareness into financial behavior risks creating social injustice, moral decay, and spiritual dissatisfaction, and he demonstrated that money is a powerful amplifier of character and intention that requires ethical management and continuous reflection in order to transform economic activity into a force for good, and he emphasized that ethical financial conduct strengthens trust, nurtures social harmony, and enhances the moral and spiritual quality of life. And in the context of the modern United States and globalized economy, Ghazali's insights remain deeply applicable, guiding individuals, corporations, policymakers, and educators to integrate moral reflection into financial decisions, prioritize fairness, justice, generosity, and social responsibility, and to recognize that prosperity and material success are only meaningful when aligned with virtue, ethical integrity, and positive social impact, and he argued that societies and individuals share responsibility for ensuring that economic systems and behaviors are structured to promote justice, transparency, accountability, and conscious stewardship of resources, and that cultivating virtue in relation to wealth requires personal reflection, disciplined behavior, ethical education, and engagement in charitable and socially beneficial initiatives, and he consistently reinforced that wealth should never be an end in itself, but a means to cultivate virtue, serve humanity, and foster moral and social well-being, and that ethical awareness in economic life is inseparable from personal fulfillment, spiritual growth, and collective flourishing, and he observed that every financial decision reflects character, shapes social outcomes, and carries moral significance, and therefore cultivating intentional ethical behavior in all aspects of earning, spending, and giving is essential for living a meaningful and responsible life, and he emphasized that money can either enslave the heart or elevate the soul, and that integrating morality into economic life transforms ordinary financial activity into a powerful instrument for personal development, social justice, and spiritual cultivation, and Ghazali's teachings thus present a comprehensive, timeless, and universal framework for understanding the link between money and morality, demonstrating that wealth is not merely material, but a reflection of character and intention, and that the ethical management of financial resources is crucial for individual fulfillment, social harmony, and collective well-being, and his philosophy challenges modern individuals to integrate virtue into their financial life, to prioritize justice, fairness, generosity, and compassion, and to recognize that true prosperity is measured not by accumulation of wealth, but by the moral impact of one's actions, the cultivation of character, and the positive contributions one makes to society. And in reflecting upon these insights, Ghazali provides enduring guidance, reminding us that money, when handled with ethical awareness, can become a vehicle for justice, virtue, social good, and spiritual growth, while wealth pursued without reflection or morality can lead to corruption, suffering, and spiritual emptiness. And therefore the connection between money and morality that he articulated continues to offer profound lessons for contemporary life, encouraging a holistic approach that integrates economic activity with ethical responsibility, spiritual mindfulness, and social consciousness. And this philosophy remains a beacon for individuals, societies, and institutions seeking to navigate the complex moral landscape of financial life to create a world in which prosperity